All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the November Patreon live stream. We'll see who all is here. We may open this up to the public if there are not enough folks to get engagement, just so I don't have to just speak extemporaneously for an hour, because I'm awful at that. I hope everybody's had a wonderful week so far. I'm very much looking forward to Friday. I fly out to San Diego for the annual meeting of the Society of Biblical Literature. This year, I'm actually chairing a session. I'm a co-chair with the Cognitive Approaches to the Biblical World program unit. And so I am chairing a session there. I'm also presenting a paper in one of those sessions. And I just love the annual meeting of the SBL. A couple of folks from Patreon actually are going to be there that I'm going to meet up with. One of them I have met in person before, the other I have not. So it should be a good time. Hi, Carl. Hope you're doing all right. I'm very excited because I now have 3 copies of my book, and this is the actual book with the actual content inside of it. These are advanced readers copies, so they're actually based on an uncorrected proof. So they're kind of they're to give people an early version of it so that they can read it and review it and talk about it on whatever channels they have. So I'm very excited about that, and maybe else. I think I might need to open this up to the public. Report back on the William Sloan Romans paper. I'm itching to hear what they have to say there. That will be an interesting session. I know Logan is really looking forward to that. All right, I think I am actually going to see if I can open this up to the public. All right. Share this link. Hi from Canada, TJ and Michaela Parks. Welcome. Hope Canada's treating you well right now. Imagine it's starting to get cold up there. Can you comment on Joel Webbon's ministry, please? Incredibly problematic Christian nationalist who is trying to resurrect incredibly outdated and hateful and harmful ideologies for the sake of trying to structure power. So, yeah. Book giveaway today. I'm not running the giveaway. I was sent some copies of the Advanced Readers Edition of my book. And the publisher is running a giveaway. They're going to give away 50 copies of this. Now, again, this is not the final version of the book. This is an uncorrected proof, printed out. It's paperback. It does not have doesn't have any of the indices. So it doesn't have the acknowledgments or anything like that. There are a bunch of blank pages that are set aside for all that stuff. But they're giving away 50 copies of this on Goodreads. And I've heard from folks that is a Jeff Bezos company. I'm not in charge of picking where they do the giveaways and everything. But if you're interested, you can go look for the book on Goodreads. And there's an entry to win one of 50 copies of those that they're giving away. And I think the entries are open until the 11th of December. Hi, Dr. Dan. Since Leviticus 18:22 is only about male same-sex intercourse, does this mean the Israelites would have been fine with female same-sex intercourse? There is some early Jewish literature that wonders about that, and some of it says, probably shouldn't be doing that, but it's not as serious as male same-sex intercourse. There's other literature that says we don't care. In fact, within the main streams of Jewish tradition, it was a Kohen was allowed to marry a woman who had been in same-sex relationships. That was not considered, that was not considered to render her in any way impure or ineligible for proper Israelite marriage to a Kohen. So there are different thoughts about it, but yeah, because the Hebrew Bible is silent on it, for the most part, it was not a concern, because when you try to understand why the male same-sex intercourse was a concern, all of it is completely absent from female same-sex intercourse. So there's no reason it would be a concern. What do you think about the connection between Jesus saying, "Why have you forsaken me?" in Psalm 22? Pretty clear connection. Mark and Matthew both have Jesus quoting that part of the psalm. And then in Luke and John, they have the soldiers casting lots for Jesus's clothes. So very clearly, that psalm is informing the way they're constructing this event. And on the Data Over Dogma podcast, Dan Beecher and I talked about Psalm 22 at some length. So if you want a lot more thoughts on on that, you can go check out that episode. And it was probably about a month ago, I think, that episode aired. Aramgard, thank you so much for the super chat question. Thoughts about Ephraim, whose roots are in Amalek in Judges 5. Is Amalek connected to Ephraim elsewhere? It's more used to them. I'm more used to them being the bad guys. Yeah, you have kind of the Hebrew Bible is kind of at war with itself in some ways about who's an irreconcilable bad guy and who's not. I don't know that I have strong feelings about that. Judges 5 is a complex text. I think that it contains some of the oldest fragments of poetry in the Hebrew Bible, but it is embedded within later poetry that is still quite early, but is not the latest. And so I think there's probably some scholars think that it is an attempt to demonize Ephraim a little bit. Others think that it is trying to recognize an early relationship between the two. There are some who think that the text is corrupt there. So there are a lot of different ways to approach it. I don't have strong enough feelings to say, no, it has to be one way or the other. But it is an interesting question. And there's a lot of great scholarship on that. In fact, Mark and Elizabeth Block-Smith, I believe they're both co-authors on it. One of the most recent Hermeneia commentary volumes to be released was their Judges volume, Judges 1. So it's like Judges chapters 1 through 9 or something like that. Like, let me pull it up. Smith and Smith, yeah, from 2021. Yep, Mark Smith and Elizabeth Block-Smith. Judges chapters 1 through 10. So they'll have a really good discussion about that in there. Patrick Sterling, thank you so much for the super chat. After my recent deconstruction, I no longer call myself a Christian, but I'm extremely thankful you have shown me a new way to love the Bible. Thanks. Well, I appreciate the very kind words. I think a lot of people might be surprised how frequently I hear from folks who say that they are no longer Christian, they're no longer believers, they're atheists, but they have a newfound appreciation for the Bible in light of a data over dogma approach. And I always love to hear that, because that's how I feel. In fact, I start off my book. I'll read you the very beginning. I love the Bible is the very first sentence. I really do. I believe it has contributed to a lot of good in this world. And this is actually where there's going to be a change in the final version where I add, without denying that it has contributed to significant harm, I believe it has contributed to a lot of good. And I go through talking about why I think a better understanding of the Bible that allows it to operate on its own terms actually contributes to a greater love for the Bible. But thank you for that comment. Laura, thank you so much. How do we know that Adonai, the God in the burning bush, is the same creator that Christ was teaching about? What is the correct spelling / pronunciation of Yeshua Yehoshua's name? So it is in Exodus 3:2. It's actually the angel of Adonai that is described as being in the burning bush, who then in verse 6 says, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. Now, the same creator that Christ was teaching about, the Bible, throughout the Hebrew Bible, early Jewish literature, the New Testament, God is represented in numerous different ways. And so in order to link all of those deities and say they're all referring to the same entity, that's a unifying framework that you kind of have to impose upon the Bible. But that is also the traditional way of approaching it. In other words, there is an unbroken line of tradition that treats the deity of Exodus 3 as the deity that is referenced in the New Testament, the God of Israel, the God of the Judahites, the God of the Judeans, the God of the Jewish people. What is the correct spelling / pronunciation of Yeshua Yehoshua's name? So Yehoshua is Hebrew. That's Joshua. Yeshua is the Aramaic variation on that name that we find in some places in post-exilic Hebrew Bible literature, and then in the Septuagint, which was translated in the 3rd to the 1st century BCE, that's rendered into Greek as Jesus. Now, there's an argument to make that the ayin on the end of Yeshua was not pronounced, at least in the Galilean pronunciation of Aramaic, and so it would have been Yeshu or Yeshu or something like that. So if I had to pick, I would say that for people who knew Jesus in the Galilee, his name was probably pronounced closer to Yeshu or Yeshu than to Yeshua or to Yehoshua. So hopefully that's helpful. And then what was your last question? Oh, that was the last question. Thank you so much for the question. Ellis, thank you so much for the sticker. IDK 4003, thank you for the question. Do you think a case can be made that Hebrews is advocating for temple worship in a Christ-centered lens, specifically chapter 10, verses 19 through 22? It's kind of suggesting that things are fulfilled in Jesus, and so there's no further need for sacrifice. So I would have a hard time interpreting that as advocacy for temple worship. But certainly there is a lot more research that I think could be done on the role of the temple within early Christianity prior to 70 CE, because at that time period, they actually would not have been Christians. They would have been Jesus followers. They would have been Jewish Jesus followers. And so the temple still would have been a part of their religious identity. But we don't know exactly what role it played. And, you know, we have in the New Testament, Paul comes and participates in a ritual that involves the temple. There's a book, I have not read it yet, but it looks fascinating, and hopefully when I finally have all the time in the world, I will get to sit down and read it. But this might be something that would be up your alley. The temple in early Christianity experiencing the sacred. And this is a part of the Anchor Yale Bible Reference Library, which is a really good series. But let me just look at the chapters here. Jesus, cleansing, trial and last supper, Paul's letters, temple imagery as religious identity, Mark, Q, and Matthew. Let's see if they have something on Hebrews, the new heavenly temple cult based on the old one. Down here, chapter 8. So so that book will talk about that to some degree. So hopefully, if my answer is probably not satisfactory, but you'll probably find more information there. Beeson, thoughts on LSB transitions like MacArthur's? Do you mean translations? Legacy Standard Bible. I don't know much about. If you're talking about the Legacy Standard Bible, I don't know a ton about it. Let me just pick around for a second in it. We'll start off looking at Genesis 1, how they render that in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. So very traditional rendering, doesn't keep up with the current scholarship on things. Let me take a look at how they feel about textual criticism of the Hebrew Bible. Deuteronomy 32:8. He set the boundaries of the peoples according to the number of the sons of Israel, which would be the standard Masoretic reading. But we know from the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Septuagint that it's an earlier version read according to the number of the sons of God. So they have not incorporated that into the main body of the text. So it sounds like tradition is overruling advances in textual criticism for this translation. Let's see, where's another one we can look at? Daniel 3:25 is one that I sometimes like to look at. And this is where Nebuchadnezzar looks into the fire. Look, I see 4 men loosed and walking about in the midst of the fire without harm. And the appearance of the fourth is like a son of the gods. That is a very good, very literal translation of the Aramaic Bar Elohim. So it's not the son of God, it's a son of gods. So that's a point in their favor. I appreciate that. Let's see, what other passages could I take a look at? Oh, I'm curious how they handle. They bracket off the pericope adulterae. I'm sure they do the same. Let's see if they do the same for the long ending of Mark. Yeah, bracket that off too. So overall, I think it's going to be a bit of a mixed bag, but it looks like they're taking some things seriously and at the same time letting tradition overrule scholarship and some other things. So overall, a mixed bag. I don't know that I have much more to say about it right off the top of my head. Milwaukee Atheist, thank you so much. Hey, hi Dan, when will we have you on Aaron's Bible study or Aaron's Bible study? I don't know. I've been invited to come on his Saturday show, but my Saturdays are phenomenally busy, and I'm going to be in San Diego this Saturday. I don't know if he's got a different show that's just a Bible study, but yeah, if I have the opportunity, I think that would be fun to join him on one of his shows. WMW Kobe, thank you so much for the question. Hey, Dr. Dan. Hey. Currently writing a paper on Greco-Roman beliefs. I need more scholarly resources. All I have right now is Bacchae. So you could look at. Do I have the whole thing here? Please tell me I have the whole thing. Hey, there we go. Something that a good start would be Jennifer Larson's book from 2016, which is entitled Understanding Greek Religion. But this is going to go through and talk about a lot of different features of Greek religion. You would also want to look at some stuff on things like Mithraism. Let me see. I should have something on that. Yeah, what do we got? Oh, that's late antiquity. That's a little after that. Beck's book, The Religion of the Mithras Cult in the Roman Empire, Mysteries of the Unconquered Sun, is really good. It's a little older. There's a 2017 book here, The Mysteries of Mithras, which is going to be a little more up to date. That's really cool Greco-Roman stuff. And this might be, is this a book or a paper? Oh, this is a book. The Cult of Mithras in Late Antiquity, Development, Decline, and Demise, CA AD 270 to 430 by David Walsh. That's going to be another text that's going to be a good look at Greco-Roman mystery cult stuff. So those are a handful of texts that I imagine would be very helpful for you. Campfire Cat, thank you so much. Do you know anything about a book, Anam Cara by John O'Donohue? I've been getting it as a suggestion, but not sure what to make of it. I don't think I know about this. Anam Cara. From 96, so almost 30 years old. What is this? Oh, it's Celtic stuff. A book of Celtic wisdom. Let's see who the publisher is. Harper Perennial. Yeah, I don't know. I would not be able to comment on that book. Let me take a look at the Umberni, Healy, the Anam Cara, Intimacy as Sacred, the Mystery of Approach. I mean, to the degree that this is an etic approach, so etic means looking in from the outside. I think it probably has a lot to commend it. A lot of times these analyses of ancient religions that try to be emic, try to speak from inside the tradition and advocate for the tradition, a lot of times they tend to be less critical. So I don't know what to the degree to which it is etic or emic, but I think I would probably be a little more willing to trust it if it were taking more of an etic approach, but I can't speak to that. But thank you for a great question. It looks like an interesting book. Is there a scholarly consensus on what 1 Timothy 2:15 means, that women should be saved through childbearing? Yes, I'm not up to date on precisely what it is, but it almost certainly has something to do with the notion that women, their quickest route to salvation is by having children, since they were the ones who were deceived by the talking snake and not Adam. Then they have to have kids to be saved, or something silly like that. But let me pull up a text that would be able to speak to the consensus. So let's see. Yeah, Raymond F. Collins has a good commentary on 1 and 2 Timothy and Titus in the New Testament Library Commentary series. And so let me see, 1 Timothy, what did you say, 2:15? Let me just see if real quick there's an easily accessible comment on this passage. There's a long excursus on on the pastor's approach to women. In verse 15, the pastor relates God's gift of salvation for women with their giving birth. Aristotle held that the ideal time for a woman to give birth was after she had reached 21 years of age, after thrice 7, blah, blah, blah. The pastor reaffirms the traditional maternal role of women. What he writes about childbearing continues his midrashic exposition of the biblical story of Eve's deception by the serpent. To the woman, Adonai said, I will greatly increase your pangs in childbearing. In pain you shall bring forth children, yet your desires shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. Apropos of this verse, Philo wrote, this experience comes to every woman who lives together with a man. It is meant not as a curse, but as a necessity. Jewish tradition held that the burden of Genesis 3:16 was somewhat mitigated when a woman gives birth. So that's a way to kind of ease the curse to some degree. The pastor states that she will be saved through childbearing. The verb is in the singular, employing a divine passive that indicates God as the source of her salvation. Some authors interpret the singular number of the verb as a reference to one particular woman. Blah, 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 blah. Limited 2nd century patristic witness exists in support of a messianic reading of 2:15. Yeah, so I'm just going to go on and talk about that. But yeah, hopefully that's a little helpful. So commentaries, hermeneutic commentaries, Anchor Yale Bible commentaries, International Critical Commentaries, New and Old Testament Library commentaries. Those are the first places I would go to try to understand what most scholars are saying about stuff. Shamgar's Oxcode says, "Hey Dan, hope all is well. Things are busy, but I'm looking forward to a wonderful weekend, and then I get to hang out with my family in San Diego and then in LA after Thanksgiving." When responding to TikToks online, how much time on average do you take researching an answer? And when it comes to translating, are you able to translate on site, or do you still make use of a lexicon? Regarding translation, most of the time I can translate on site. If it's something obscure, if it's Job, if it's Aramaic, if it's poetry that I haven't seen before, I usually make use of a lexicon. But for the most part, I can translate on site. How much time do I take researching? It depends on what it is. If it's something I've never seen before, it might take me, and it depends on what kind of question it is, because there are certain questions where it's like, okay, there's a datum out there. I just need to find the datum, and it's a single datum, and then I have my answer. And so it's just as easy as looking into a handful of commentaries, or trying to find a monograph on it, or trying to find a paper that's been published on it, and I just need to see the datum. Other times it's a lot more complex, and I have to take things from a variety of different places and synthesize them to try to understand something. In those cases, it might take, these days I don't spend more than a couple of hours researching before I move on to something else, just because of how busy I've been toward the end of this year. Next year, I'm hoping to be able to take more time and maybe do some, research over the course of a week or two in prepping for a video response or something like that. So it really has a lot to do with my schedule and things like that. So these days I've been, the last few months, because I've been so busy, I have been defaulting to things that are a little easier for me to answer, either because I've answered them before and so I already know and don't have to look anything up, or things that I know will be a little easier to research. Carl J says, on the recent Data Over Dogma, you talked about ritual impurities. It mostly required washing in water and wasn't really a sin. What was a sin to historical Jewish followers and required a sacrifice? There were a lot of things that were considered sins. When you look in the Hebrew Bible at the commandments, violating the commandments are obviously things that were considered sins. And I think some of the requirements to bring offerings even stipulate precisely what kinds of sins they're talking about. But yeah, when you look at the ritual impurity framework, it's not talking about the same thing. It's talking about things that are unrelated to violating the commandments. Shamgar's Oxcode asks, have you encountered a TikTok video that rang your alarm bells, but after research you found out it was up to snuff? It has, something like that has happened a few times, and I'm trying to remember the details, and it's not really coming to me. Yeah, it has happened, but it's been a while. My spider senses tend to be quite well calibrated these days. Oh, there's got to be something. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but yes, that has definitely happened before. And oh, I haven't shared this publicly before. I've had a lot of people recently ask me to like verify, confirm videos, and do like a no notes video. And I haven't done that because I'm on the, I don't know what they call it, the creator fund or whatever. It's one of the streams of income I have now since I'm doing this full time. And so my videos have to be over a minute. They have to meet a bunch of criteria. And one of these criteria is originality. And so if I just share somebody else's 2 or 3 minute video, or even 1 minute video, and I'm there at the beginning and at the very end to say no notes, then I'll get dinged for violating the originality criterion. And if that happens, like, I think they said if I get like 5 of those in a month or something like that, I'm kicked out of the program. So I have been loath to make videos that will violate the criteria for the program. So I haven't made a video that's been less than a minute in like 2 years. Well, yeah, almost 2 years. And I haven't done those no notes videos because of that as well. which annoys me because I would like to amplify some of the folks out there who are making really good points and really great observations. So I've got to find a way around that, but I also don't want to compromise that stream of income. So that's something that's on my radar. I'm trying to figure that out. Silent Mandible, thank you so much for the question. Is there any advice you would give to an agnostic with OCD who suffers from scrupulosity, despite or even because of the agnosticism? Ooh, I'm definitely not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, so I don't know that I would have any advice to offer, because that's certainly not my experience. Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know much about how to treat things like scrupulosity and OCD, but I would think that I don't know. My intuition would be to condition yourself to try to lean into it a little bit, but I can imagine that advice might be harmful, because it can be different for everybody. So I don't think that I would have I don't think I have advice that I could give you that I would be confident in, much less I would expect you to be confident in. But I know some folks who have dealt with that kind of stuff. So I will try, and in fact, I will see some of them this weekend. So I will try to talk to them about that. So I apologize for not being able to give you a better answer than that. Nashville, thank you so much for the question. Do you think Jesus is God or just a man in the Bible? If you don't think he's God or is just a man, how would you explain Matthew 28:16-20? So I think that the New Testament, the Gospels, represent Jesus as divine, but that doesn't necessarily mean God, because God is just one member in the category of deity, which has many members. And regarding Matthew, and as I've argued in a paper that I published in Biblical Interpretation back in 2016, as I've argued in the appendix of my book, Adonai's Divine Images, I have developed a theoretical framework for understanding divine mediation as an innovation on the logic of divine images, which accounts for how, like, an inanimate object can be both the deity and not the deity at the same time. So Matthew 28:16 doesn't have, like, I've always been baffled by why anyone would suggest that means Jesus is God. Let me pull it up real quick. So it's just the Great Commission, and it says, go ye therefore, in verse 19, and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Ghost. And this can be distributive. Like, you can understand this to mean the name of the Father and the name of the Son and the name of the Holy Ghost. Like, none of that means that these entities all share one being. But even if it is just one name, the name that pertains to the Father and to the Son and to the Holy Ghost, the theoretical framework that I've developed is precisely about the name as a communicable vehicle of divine agency and authority and presence. So I think that makes better sense of what's going on there if you do read that, not as distributive, but as including all of them in there. And so I don't understand why that would be anything other than, or why that would require a Trinitarian reading. So I think the texts are presenting Jesus as divine, but not as God. I think the historical Jesus was, the data indicate the historical Jesus was just a man. But thank you for the question. Sketchy Getchy, thank you so much for the question. Have you seen Conclave or Heretic? Any thoughts? I have seen neither. I have a lot of friends who've seen Heretic. Where's that set? Is that set in the, no, that's set in Europe somewhere, isn't it? Is that set in the, oh, it's set in England. Okay. Yeah, no, I have not seen a movie in a theater for a while, just because I've been so busy. So unfortunately, I've not been able to see that, but I have a lot of friends who've seen it, and I've heard both good and bad things about it. Both that it is sensitive to LDS ideologies and carefully represents them, as well as that it is completely misses the mark. So I've heard it's a mixed bag. Nashville, thank you for another question. Do you? I think we addressed this one already, but thank you for contributing again. Kyle, thank you so much. Thoughts on the standard Christian understanding of the Tetragrammaton? Hand, behold, nail, behold, and other derivatives, real coincidence or not? Are there any other analyses on the character's meaning? I've got several videos on this. It's pure and utter nonsense. To begin, Hebrew is not a pictographic language. It is an acrophonic language where each character represents a sound. Now, the character descends from a pictographic representation of the word that begins with that sound, but the only thing that is carried on into its acrophonic usage is the sound that begins the word. So the letter bait it's a variation on an early pictographic representation of a house, which in Northwest Semitic languages was bite. The word bite begins with a b, so the drawing of the house represents the sound b, full stop. That's an acrophonic script. Hebrew is an acrophonic script. It does not carry any other significance. After the Bible, and in some limited and kind of squishy exceptions within certain parts of the Bible, but after the Bible is primarily when, in an effort to try to extract more meaning and significance out of the text, you had a mystical stream of Jewish tradition that was later taken into Christianity that tries to see significance in the way the letters are written, in some of the pre-Hebrew ideographic, pictographic use of Proto-Semitic. And the way that Christians do it is also entirely inaccurate, because, for instance, the Vav was not a nail; it was a hook. It's the hook that holds a curtain. And so when they try to say, oh, it means nail, they want you to think of a nail that somebody would use to crucify someone with, and that's completely nonsensical. Behold is not right. That's based on a Proto-Semitic character that was a man with upraised arms, and it was an interjection. It was like, aha, or it was, oh, or it was some frightened something like that. So behold, as in check it out, that's nonsense as well. So yeah, that whole thing is pure and utter nonsense. And I've published a bunch of videos on that. The Craigmeister, what is Exodus 4:24 through 26 rhetorical goal with this weird foreskin story? That's the perennial question. I wish I knew. There are a lot of scholars who have pointed out there's got to be something in the background, some tradition, some myth that is being alluded to here related to this. But it seems to be kind of a scary stories to tell in the dark, where the point is God takes circumcision very seriously, therefore so should you. So, you know, in boys camp, when the counselor is telling the scary story at night and rattling the flashlight against your bunk bed to scare you, the idea is, so make sure you get circumcised. But within Judaism, it's too late for that. If you're already Jewish. So yeah, what exactly it's based on, and that is, I still kind of instinctively do this, which is something I learned in Uruguay, which means I don't know. But yeah, that I really wish we had an answer to that question, because scholars have been scratching their head about that one for a long time. If it's some ancient Jewish tradition, or if it's borrowed from Mesopotamia or from Egypt or somewhere else, yeah, I don't know. Ronan of Stag, thank you for the question. Hey, Dan. Hey, Ronan. Thanks for staying awesome. Appreciate it. Kuad, could there have been a correlation with Vesuvius and Pompeii in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah? Please, 8, all the best, I assume that means. And right back at you. That is probably not the case. I don't remember the exact year, when Vesuvius erupted, but I think it was centuries after the story was already in circulation. Yeah, it's after the destruction of the Jerusalem temple in 70 CE. So it erupted in 79 CE. And yeah, the story of Sodom and Gomorrah had already been in circulation for many centuries. So no, it was definitely not that. Although certainly, no. Sorry, I was just thinking of the blooper reel from Anchorman, where Will Ferrell talks about those sad villagers of Pompeii. And if you have not seen that, not safe for work, but one of the funniest bloopers I've ever seen in my life. And whenever I hear Pompeii, I always think of Pohnpei, which is an island in the South Pacific, the capital of the Federated States of Micronesia, to which I have been multiple times. And so I hear Pohnpei 20 times as much as I hear Pompeii. And so the other one gets stuck in my head. So for a second, I was like, what on earth are you talking about? But no relationship. Rhino Time 117, thank you so much for the question. Do Christians, Jews, Muslims worship the same God? That's up to them to determine, because otherwise you'd have to be able to identify an actual entity that could be demonstrated to be the object of their worship. And since there are no data that support the identification of any such entity out there, it's really just their perception. So it's up to their perception, and I'm pretty sure that you're never going to get all of them to agree. So yeah, that's going to be up to the person who answers the question. Aramgard, thank you for the question. Thoughts on Isaiah Qumran seemingly being split after chapter 33. How do we square this with Deutero-Isaiah seemingly starting at 40? There are a handful of folks who have suggested, well, they're just splitting it in half. 33 in the first half, and you get 34 through 66 in the second half. I don't think it has anything at all to do with the actual development of Isaiah, because that would have happened centuries before these texts were transmitted at Qumran. So they had absolutely no knowledge of how the book of Isaiah came together. So I don't think it really means much at all to the theory of first, second, and third Isaiah. Those folks were just doing their own thing with the text. But there are certainly arguments about what it means to early Jewish interpretations of Isaiah. Campfire Cat, thank you so much for the question. What makes something a philosophy instead of religion? Somebody calls it a philosophy instead of a religion. I know they're linked, but where does it differentiate? Is it a matter of worshiping a deity? So in the study of religion these days, and particularly, well, not so much in the cognitive science of religion, I actually think they have some more work to do, but in the more general study of religion, a deity is not necessarily a necessary feature of what we label religion. And so that wouldn't necessarily be it. But certainly in the kind of popular conceptualization of philosophy and religion, yes, philosophies are going to be more about natural rather than teleological kind of frameworks and forces. But yeah, fuzzy boundaries, depends on how you conceptualize each. Certainly you can have religions that are philosophies. Certainly you can have philosophies that are not religions. But in a very similar way, that depends on the conceptualization of the person answering the question, asking the question, thus and so. Brian, thank you so much for the question. Love your work. Well, I appreciate the very kind words. I'm a philosopher. Any thoughts on semiotics or other philosophical fields of study? So within cognitive linguistics, I dabble a little bit in semiotics, and I've dealt a little bit with like Peircean semiotics and things like that, but I tend to default more toward the scientific side of things than the philosophy side of things. I think Wittgenstein was way ahead of his time within cognitive science of religion. Prototype theory is basically kind of affirms some of what Wittgenstein talked about when it came to language games and things like that. And there's a lot that is very, very different. But when we talk about like family resemblances and things like that, I think Wittgenstein gets the closest to what the experimental data suggest is going on when we think about categories and language and stuff like that. So that's the closest I get to philosophy. If I had more time, I would love to dig deeper into stuff. And I get accused all the time of being Hegelian and Marxist and all that kind of stuff. And Foucault and people who don't know what any of those things are love to accuse me of being reliant on all those things. The Prep Project, thank you so much for the question. What advice would you give to someone in college who is interested in probably joining the LDS, but parents strongly disagree and they're paying for college and making it very difficult to make that move? I don't really think that advice about decisions about religions is within the boundaries of my channel, but I would say weigh your options carefully, because losing out on college education would be a pretty big loss. But at the same time, if it's something that you feel is that important to you and that is worth the risk, that's quite the costly signal. So, but yeah, I would just say be careful with that. Andrew, thank you so much for the question. Hey, Dan, what does Jesus mean where he speaks on hell in Matthew 25:41 and Mark 10:28? I am new to the Bible and have heard different things. Dante's Gehenna. So one, we have two different authors here, so they're not going to represent Jesus meaning the exact same thing. Two, they were all drawing in their own ways from streams of tradition that were pretty widespread. So what do we have in Mark? Mark 10:28, Peter began to say to him, look, we have left everything and followed you. That might not be the right one. Matthew 25:41. Then he will say to those at his left hand, you who are accursed, depart from me into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. So that's based on the Enochic tradition, the idea that that post-mortem divine punishment was originally set up for the angels who the fallen angels who descended with the head malevolent angel, who in the Enochic tradition is Shemi-Hazah, as Melchirashah, is Mastema, is a bunch of different names, Azazel, Asael. I think a couple of times Azazel is referred to as Satan. So that is the Enochic notion that either eternal darkness under the mountains or eternal fire is how God chose to punish the angels who fell. So that's Enochic in origin, but so is the concept of hell. But we have different ideas about the concept of hell in the New Testament. And so I would point to, there are a couple places I would point for more information on the way that hell is being represented. One is a paper from a volume called Jesus in Continuum. I'll just share that with you. So Jesus in Continuum, I think it's from 2012. And there's a paper right here, Heikki Räisänen, 355, Jesus and Hell, that goes through different concepts of post-mortem divine punishment. And there are three general categories. You have annihilationism, where the punishment is that you just cease to exist. You are annihilated. You have temporary conscious torment, followed by either annihilation or salvation. So universalism comes into play here, where you are punished for a time and then you pay your dues and you are saved. Or you're punished for a time and then you pay your dues, so you're annihilated. And then you have eternal conscious torment. Those are the three main categories that scholars have discerned within the New Testament. Another text that you could look up is I am forgetting the author's name, and as soon as I see it, I'm going to be like, of course. Finney, there it is, of course. Resurrection, hell, and the afterlife, body and soul in antiquity, Judaism, and early Christianity, I think is probably the most comprehensive discussion that is available right now of how the concept of hell developed. So I would highly recommend that if you're looking for an academic discussion. Although it can be pricey, definitely don't go to Anna's Archive or LibGen or any of those places like that. You want to stay away from those places. Brian, thank you so much. As a heavy studier of Hegel, Marx, etc., that is hilarious and also a classic accusation towards everyone. Yeah, it's what people learn to sling at the boogeyman. Structuralism and post-structuralism is probably close to home for you. Yeah, post-structuralism, my dissertation, I dealt a little bit with post-structuralism, particularly as it came dealing with materialism and things like that. So I talked a bit about that, but yeah, a little closer to home. Fun stuff. Yeah, I wish I wish I had time to dive more into it. Julio Jimenez, thank you so much for the contribution. Oh, where did my? Okay, there's my window. I've missed some questions. Speaking of circumcision, Simone says, I had to take the opportunity. What do you think about Thiessen's argument, re Jubilees requiring eighth-day circumcision and Paul agreeing, therefore condemning proselyte circumcision as ineffectual? I like it, but I don't know how well received it is and what the counterpositions are. I generally don't argue against Thiessen when it comes to anything he says about Paul, because he knows Paul a lot better than me. But I will be honest, I don't know all the details of that argument, but it does sound provocative. Shamgar's Oxcode says the real question is, do Christians, Jews, and Muslims hate the same ball? Depends. In the Hebrew Bible, and you have Beelzebub, which is an editorialization on Baal's title, Zevul Baal or Beelzebul, which is what is found in the New Testament. As a Hegelian and a Marxist and someone who's read Foucault, you're clearly not any of those things, for better or for worse. Yeah, and the people who sling those accusations around don't know what they're talking about, but that's nothing new. Theron Gilliland, yeah, I just saw what you said. Your last name and mine have the same origin. Son of the servant of Saint Philoner Wolf. You alluded to it on Diablo Critics. Yeah, when I was at Oxford, I did a bunch of heraldry research and visited Kirkcudbright in the Dumfries, which is where McClellan Castle is, and went into the visitor's shop. And I was like, I'm a McClellan, what do I get? And they were like, look at the logbook. And it was just rows and rows and rows of McClellan's, the different spellings. But we have neighbors named Gilliland, and I was looking at the like 117 different spellings or whatever, and saw Gilliland was one of the variations on that last name. So yeah, I think that's fascinating. And then I went into a tartan shop, and they were like, well, first off, you would use your mother's name, not your father's name. And my mother's maiden name is Davis, and they were like, well, that would probably be from Davidson, so you would want Davidson stuff. And I was like, this means nothing to me. I don't care about Davidson tartan. So I was a little disappointed with that, but Dr. Tony Heiser, thank you so much. Do you think the evolutionary development of the brain has any insight into the development of religion? Well, yeah, that's basically what the cognitive science of religion has been trying to do, figure out how human evolution contributes to this thing that we label religion. So let me pull up some stuff that I think would be helpful to know about if you're interested in looking at that kind of stuff. Just give me a second. There are a handful of things that I'll point to two. No, I'll point to 3. That's good, yeah. So here are some texts that I would recommend for understanding a little bit better how evolution plays into religion. Pascal Boyer, who is one of the innovators of the cognitive science of religion, has this book from 2011 that I really like, The Fracture of an Illusion, Science and the Dissolution of Religion. Ilka Pisianen's book, Supernatural Agents, Why We Believe in Souls, Gods, and Buddhas, is a wonderful discussion of deity concepts and where they come from. Ara Noren Sayan's book, Big Gods, How Religion Transformed Cooperation and Conflict, is also very good. And I also discuss evolution and its role in this thing we call religion, and particularly the conceptualization of deity in my own book, Adonai's Divine Images. And I go into a lot more detail in the dissertation version of that as well. And then, yeah, there are just tons of books on cognitive science of religion. Brian, okay, last one, then I'll leave you alone. I appreciate the the contribution. Thoughts on Aquinas' argument for the existence of God? I consider myself atheist, but always thought the cosmological argument was strongest. I've never been one of those people who thinks these arguments are incredibly strong. They just don't convince me. I mean, if the world were fundamentally logical, based, in kind of the a priori way that so much philosophy requires it be for these arguments to make sense, I think I would be a little more convinced. But yeah, I've never found any of them particularly convincing. For me, what the arguments for God are is beginning from a conclusion and then just trying to come up with the most sophisticated, convincing argument you can for the dogma that you started from. So I've never found the arguments particularly convincing. And as much as I engage with apologists and apologetics, how convincing an argument is depends entirely on the perspective, the orientation, the presuppositions of the person thinking about it. And if you are motivated to accept an argument, and I'm not saying you are, but folks who are motivated to accept arguments are obviously going to be more easy to convince. So maybe I've never encountered an articulation of the cosmological argument that I found particularly convincing. But yeah, I've always just been kind of like, that doesn't really resonate with me. Doesn't make that tuning fork go off. But yeah, I have always appreciated skeptics who can acknowledge the rationality or the reason of some of those arguments. The PrEP Project, does Rorty's epistemology accord with cognitive science? I don't think I know who you mean by Rorty. I may just be blanking on something because I'm thinking of Rory McIlroy for some reason, but someone can let me know who Rorty is. I would be better situated to answer that question. And I've got 2 minutes before I've got to head out. The People's Weenus, good to see you again. Thank you so much for the question. In the first century, demons were the explanation for illness and disease. Was this a belief that the contemporary medical community had to combat, or did they go along with it? Thank you. I think it depends on you certainly had, your more homeopathic side of the medical community, and then your more philosophically oriented side of the medical community. So I think it's probably a little of both. But yeah, what is the saying? It must have been great to be a doctor back in the 19th century. You've got ghosts in your blood. You should do coke about it. Was the answer to everything. Yeah, certainly there are medical texts from around that time period that would not have found it convincing that pathologies were caused by demons, but certainly it would have been something that they would have to fight against. I mean, you got people today saying that vaccines are not safe and effective, or that they're dangerous. So the medical community is always fighting against misinformation from motivated naysayers. So that's probably been the case for millennia. Okay, it's 8. I'll answer the last 2 questions we got here. Jonka, thank you so much for the question. Someone told me that the earliest depictions of him were of a Sundisk, and trying to defend the belief that people always thought of Adonai as immaterial. I think he's mixing that iconography up with Egyptian gods. Thoughts? There are arguments to make that Adonai is associated with solar deities, but that would be based on syncretism with Egyptian deities. Aten was the sun disk that we see represented in Atenism. Akhenaten's brief attempt to try to centralize all worship with Aten, which took place in the 15th, 14th centuries BCE, very brief time period when that was the case. And like Psalm 104 seems to be under the influence of some solar deity stuff coming from Egypt. There are, this is my 3D printed model of the Tanakh cult stand, which is about 50% bigger in real life. But at the very top, you've got an equine figure and a sun disk. And so scholars at first were like, it's Adonai. I happen to think that all of these registers probably represent Asherah or a related goddess. And the equine figure certainly aligns with that a little better. So there is association with sun disks, but always thought of Adonai as immaterial. No, immateriality as a philosophical concept didn't exist within ancient Israel. That was something that was borrowed from Greek philosophy, and there's a good paper on that. Renahan, I think, is the name of the author. It's an older paper, but this is a wonderful discussion of where concepts of immateriality come from. On the Greek origins of the concepts incorporeality and immateriality are Renahan. So they didn't think of deity as immaterial anciently. They thought of spirit as a more pure and a more wily kind of material. So it was like the wind. In fact, ruach means spirit and also means wind. And, you can't grab the wind. You can't defeat the wind. You can't break the wind, so to speak. So it was impervious. It was invulnerable. And so deity was like that as well. So when it says, the Egyptians are what does it say? They're flesh and not spirit. That's not to say they're material and not immaterial. It's to say they are vulnerable and not invulnerable. But yeah, I think the solar iconography is definitely under the influence of Egypt. Bo Nix for Rookie of the Year. I'm afraid you've got me. Is he who the? I have tried so hard to avoid watching football this year, and I have not watched a single Broncos game. So I did not know who that was, but I'll have to look that up. I watched one BYU game because BYU was undefeated, and then they went to play Utah, and that's always a toss-up, and BYU managed to win that one. And then they lose to Kansas in the week after and totally torpedo the whole season. So that was disappointing. All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for the questions. I'm sorry I was not able to get to everybody. Do you do these live chats at the same time each week? I do not. I kind of do them whenever I have time just because my schedule right now is so hectic. But if you join my Patreon, there are 2 scheduled live streams I do a month. And so on the Patreon, people have advanced access to the schedule. And then I'll do a handful of other kind of random live streams. But at the second lowest level, you have access to the live streams. And then the highest level on Patreon also has access to the live stream. So that's the best way to know when you can catch me on a live stream. Next year, I will try to be a little more regimented and scheduled about live streams, though. So hopefully, people will be able to plan to join me more regularly. Thank you so much, everybody. I appreciate your time. I appreciate everybody who made contributions. I'm able to do what I do for a living because of y'all. And also, on a personal note, I made a video earlier today about a neighbor of mine, 2 houses down that way, who just had his leg amputated below his knee because of diabetes. I've started a GoFundMe because his family's faced with a lot of medical bills that they can't pay right now. So I don't know if anybody watching has seen that or contributed, but thank you so much to people who have contributed. That's going to make a big difference for the Hawkins family, and it means an awful lot. So thank you very much, very sincerely. It is greatly appreciated. And I hope you all have a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. Hope you have enough food on the table. Hope you have people around you who love you. And I hope you have a warm and a safe place to spend the night. And I will talk to you all later. Bye, everybody.